On this episode of Locked On Angels, we've got the arbitration numbers for the players that have signed and the gap between the Halos and the unsigned players. So we're going to share all of the numbers, and then we're going to share how this will impact the team moving forward. It's time to get locked on with Mike and John, and this is Locked On Angels.
You are Locked On Angels, your daily Los Angeles Angels podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Doing the show with my sexy voice. Thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. You can find us anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcast, Spotify, and SiriusXM by searching Locked On Angels. And if you'd like to get back to the Super Halo Bros for all the Super Halo content, here's some things that you can do. Leave us a rate and a review on Apple Podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe and become a Locked On Everydayer. And whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube and leave a comment. It's really one of the best ways to get in touch with us and be a part of the conversation. And this episode of Locked On Angels is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel, and new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com to get started.
How about the Commanders going for it on fourth down? Now, I don't know how the game ended yet because we're finishing this episode before that, but they're playing football like I play Madden, Mike. That's how. Thanks for being here for this episode of Locked On Angels, where it's your team every day. You've got the Fresh Brothers here with you, aka the Super Halo Bros. My name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Hey, we are in our third off season currently, and we're getting ready for our fourth full-time season here as the host of Locked On Angels with the Halo Bros. We're doing 3 days a week right now, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then we'll ramp back up to 5 episodes a week every single weekday once pitchers and catchers report. Also want to give a shout out to those who in our comments mentioned they donated to Convoy of Hope, even all the way from Germany, Mike. So thank you.
Awesome.
I think it was Dr. King Schultz in our comments. So thank you for that.
From one German to another, Frisch to Schultz. Thank you
right.
very much. Right?
That's right. But if you want to help out with the California wildfires and just support those who've lost their homes, and this goes from the Palisades to Pasadena and Altadena and everything. There's a link in the episode description for Convoy of Hope. It's an organization that Mike and I really trust, and 100% of your donations will go towards that, not paying salaries or anything like that. They have a really high star rating as well when it comes to charities and organizations as well. On today's show, Mike, Harold Reynolds. I knew I liked this guy. He talked about the Halos, said some very interesting things that we'll get into in segment 3. Jack Flaherty and Anthony Santander, or should I say Anthony Santander, they are still available and may take shorter deals. But first, the arbitration numbers are in. Mike, let's talk about arbitration, what that means, and where the Halos landed with some of their players.
Yeah, so Angels have a few players that are still under their control until they hit free agency. These are players that have that 6 years of control. And then arbitration is helping them to find their value compared to other players in the league. And so you sit down, you present numbers, and you hope that you can come to an agreement. If you don't come to an agreement, which the Angels didn't come to an agreement with 3 players, then you have to go to arbitration, and then you have an arbitrator that actually picks the salary, and you both have to agree to that. So here's the players that they agreed to. Joe Adell got $2.1 million for this season. Brock Burke, $1.15 million. Remember, he's a lefty out of the bullpen. Reed Detmers, $1.825 million. Taylor Ward, $7.825 million. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then some guy named Jose Suarez got $1.1 million, and we'll talk about that in a second. John, let's talk about Taylor Ward first. Are you surprised by his number? Because reports said that he was going to maybe make $9 to $10 million, but he came in at $7.825 million.
The fact that that's what they agreed to with Taylor Ward, that means the Angels presented it, Taylor Ward accepted it, and they came to that number. So it tells me that Ward, I don't think he wanted to mess around. And so I kind of like that in a sense, because Mike, I think he is worth $9 to $10 million. And again, that's the projection that Taylor Ward was getting from like MLB trade rumors and different websites. So around 9 to 10 million, the Angels save about 1.2 million. If you think about it at 9 million, maybe 2.2 million, if it was going to get up to 10. And so that to me kind of speaks to the fact that maybe this incentivizes the Angels to keep him around, considering he's not going to be as expensive as they thought he would be. I know it sounds funny, but when you're dealing with $1 million and $2 million of difference, it sounds like a lot to us. But when it comes to these players, look, that money can be well spent somewhere else or help pay for somebody else's contract. So it is interesting that they kept Taylor Ward. It feels like to me that this incentivizes the Halos to keep Taylor Ward around. The kind of production he puts up for $7.825 million, that's a good deal. And if Taylor Ward were to be a free agent in this market, I mean, look at what did Conforto get? Like 15 million, 18 million, or something like that from the Dodgers. And I think Taylor Ward ends up being a better player than like Michael Conforto this season. So to me, I think it incentivizes the Halos to keep him. I am not very high on the fact that they're going to trade him. And I know we've talked a lot about that this offseason, but it's mostly because that's the name that keeps coming up in conversations among all the rumor mongerers out there, right? That people are interested in Taylor Ward. It sounds like the Pirates have been interested. It sounds like the Royals have been interested. We've previously heard the Guardians over last offseason. And so to me, I wonder if this means that the Halos are planning on keeping him around. Now, one of the things we have heard from, insiders from MLB is that the requests for Taylor Ward have been met with like really high asks, really high return. Should that be the case for Taylor Ward? What do you say?
I think that his value goes up because he only signed for this much money. I think that that's why he's a bit more valuable, because he is a productive guy. And one of the things that we've talked about on this show is that he does fit really well in a productive lineup. He is a plus one in a lineup, right? He's not supposed to be the one, but if he's a plus one in a lineup, then he can be somebody that could be a protective piece for a bigger bat, or he could be somebody that if you skip the bigger bat, then guess what? You're going to find yourself going up against Taylor Ward, who, if he can be the guy that he was the last few years, can be really, really productive. So I think his trade value is probably more higher right now because of the contract. And it's why I think the Royals and some of those teams are really interested in Taylor Ward right now, because he is somebody who is a bit cheaper for the Angels to deal with, and other teams that maybe can't spend like Dodgers or spend like the Yankees or spend like other teams, then this would be a perfect piece for them to trade for. And then perhaps the Angels could get something. But all indications are right now that Perry Manassian's really asking for the moon when it comes to Taylor Ward. And this team needs to improve. And so I would love to see them not just,
I hear you.
You know what I mean? I'd love for them to not just give Taylor Ward away. I want them to get a good piece. I just don't know if you want to hold that piece so close to the chest that you get nothing, because Shohei Ohtani is the greatest example of that. They didn't trade him, and then they didn't get anything. And now we're in a situation where we're watching him be incredible for another team, and we didn't reap any sort of benefit or reward by trading him away, right?
Right. And I think about, don't sleep on Ryan Johnson, though. That's the compensation pick we got for Shohei Ohtani. But no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there's a delicate balance of whether or not you need to trade away this guy or not. And like you said, the fact that his number is only 7.8 million, that's going to incentivize a lot of teams who are really interested in having him. There were 3 players who didn't agree to terms. It was Jose Quijada, Luis Rengifo, and Mickey Moniak. Now, this means that the Angels and the players are going to have to arbitrate, meaning they get to say, here's every reason why we shouldn't pay them the money that they wanted. And the players say, well, here's why you should pay me the money that I wanted. Luis Rengifo filed at $5.95 million. And the Angels filed at $5.8 million. Mike, that's $105,000.
Yeah.
That's petty, right? Isn't that
Feels
just
like
petty? I mean, Rengifo should be a guy you're extending. You shouldn't be arguing whether or not he deserves a drop in the bucket, a coin, right? And because that's what this feels like, especially at this stage of the game. I mean, the guy has been super productive. I know he's been hurt the last 2 years. I know that the half seasons have been great, but he hasn't been able to finish the season. but the difference between 5.95 million and
Yeah.
5.8 million, that just feels petty to me. For Jose Quijada, the Angels filed at 975,000, and Quijada filed at 1.14 million. And for Mickey Moniak, he filed at 2 million. The Angels filed at 1.5 million. The numbers to me aren't that far off. I think that somebody like Quijada should be easily settled.
Sure.
You know, the fact that he wants 1.1 million and Jose Suarez got 1.1 million.
Yeah.
I think that you're kind of dinging him just for the fact that he got hurt and had Tommy John and all this stuff. I think he's at least worth $1 million. And I know, again, it's coins in a bucket when it comes to the numbers that we're talking about. But when you compare what Quijada wants versus what Jose Suarez got, I think that's kind of laughable. I think about Mickey Moniak and the fact that Joe Adell got 2.1 million. Moniak wanted 2. The Angels filed at 1.5. I think 1.5 feels right. I even think like 1.75 feels right. And to me, I think that Joe Adell has brought a lot more value to the team over Mickey Moniak. I know we often talk about them as kind of interchangeable players, but at the same time, I think it makes sense for Moniak to land somewhere in between. Maybe that's the negotiation tactic too, is you aim high, the team aims low, and then you meet in the middle and get what you actually really wanted. Does that seem like the case?
Yeah, which is so stupid that Suarez got 1.1 million then.
I know.
Like, I mean, I would offer him a hamburger and some fries. I mean, that's the reality with that guy. And the
he
fact
should
that
be
they
making
settled,
the hamburgers and
right?
fries.
The fact that they settled at 1.1 million with that guy and he was terrible. And then Jose Quijada, who had to come back from injury and actually was pretty good coming back from injury, and they didn't even offer him $1 million contract. It just seems really silly, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. And now, if you want to kind of a breakdown of roughly where the Angels stand in 2025 with the payroll, guaranteed salaries as of now, 169.7 million. And then that's a 165.7 million annual average value. The estimated arbitration salaries remaining, the Angels will probably spend about 8.7 million. And then you have the estimated non-guaranteed salaries, benefits, all the extra stuff, 33.8 million. So again, there's some estimates in there. So roughly the Angels sit at about 212.2 million so far. So let us know your thoughts. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot about Jose Suarez in the comments. So make sure you jump in the comment section on YouTube, whether you're watching or listening. Find today's show, get in the comment section. We want to hear your thoughts on these arbitration numbers. Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Coming up on the show, Jack Flaherty, Anthony Santander are still available, and we got word they're looking for shorter deals. So should the Halos jump at the chance to sign one of them, or perhaps, Mike, even both of them? That $105,000 they saved from Luis Rengifo might go a long way. We'll talk about that coming right up.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. I love that. The FanDuel Sports app gives you everything you need to place live bets, same-game parlays, so much more. And they have so many ways for you to pick up a big W. You can bet on who's going to win the games, but you can also bet on the player who's going to score the most touchdowns, score the first touchdown, the team that's going to score the most points, or maybe the first points. It's all at FanDuel.com. And again, you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets if you visit FanDuel.com, and you can make this playoff season unforgettable. That's great with this raspy voice. With FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL.
Surprised you went for it. Well done. This is a Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Mike, over the weekend, we heard reports from the usual suspects, Ken Rosenthal, right? That outfielder, Anthony Santander, and right-hander, Jack Flaherty, are now both open to considering a shorter deal. Santander, Flaherty are looking for 5-year deals previously, and they could have ranged into the 9-figure kind of deal, but they had a contract offer from Santander on the table from the Blue Jays as of last week. And though Now it seems like they're both open to exploring short-term deals, and it may seem like the offers out there, even though they were longer-term deals, just not what they were looking for. And so the fact that Santander didn't accept the Blue Jays offer, which again, 9 figures, 5 years, that sort of thing, seems like that's the kind of deal that he would want. But is it the fact that it's the Blue Jays? Does he not want to move to Canada? Is that what the issue is? But it's interesting that both Santander and Flaherty are open to these shorter term deals. If you're the GM here, what's your play here for Flaherty, Santander? What do you say?
Well, I think, first of all, Johnny, this as a repeat of last year's offseason with some of those big players that didn't get signed until late in the game, and then they struggled at the beginning of the season. And so there's some of that repeating this offseason with some of these big players. If I'm the Angels GM, I'm in this conversation, and I'm offering a deal to Flaherty and Santander, and I'm offering them a 3-year deal with opt-outs or a 2-year deal with an opt-out, and maybe giving them a high AAV, maybe $23 and $25 million. You give 25 to Flaherty and 23 to Santander. And I don't know where that puts the Angels overall with their finances, but I don't think that puts them over the luxury tax. Probably gets them kind of close to the luxury tax. Mm-hmm. But I think that I would offer them a high AAV and really small amount of years, because an Anthony Santander on your team this year and perhaps next year could be a really great benefit. Then you're not connected to this guy who could potentially fall off the cliff, right? And not be the great player that he has been the last couple of years. And then with Flaherty, it's interesting because he has always had questions about him, questions about his arm, questions about his shoulder. And he actually was going to be traded, I believe, to was it the Yankees? And then the Yankees had some questions about him. And then immediately the Dodgers swooped in and grabbed him. And then he ended up being a great pitcher for them during their playoff run, and then eventually winning the World Series. So if I'm Perry, I'm in, and I'm offering a good chunk of change for a small amount of years. But I'll be quite honest with you, John. I don't think that the Angels are even in these conversations, even if the years are really small, because I think the AAV might scare them away, might scare Artie away. And I don't know if Perry can figure out how to navigate that and keep this team under the luxury tax.
It's frustrating because this is the fact that these guys are looking for short-term deals. It's what the Angels have been doing over the last couple of years. So to me, it's like, man, you got to jump at the chance to get these guys, and pay them 25 for 1 year, 2 year, that sort of thing. And here's the thing about what happened with somebody like Flaherty. He needed a bounce back kind of season, because between the Cardinals and the Orioles didn't perform that well in 2023. So then he lands on the Tigers on this, on a quick deal. And by the trade deadline, he's with the world champions. He's with the World Series winning Dodgers. And to me, it seems like that could easily happen again. And if you're Flaherty or Santander, you look at the Angels and go, yeah, maybe I'll stick around for a year or two, or maybe I'll get traded at the deadline and go to a playoff contender and actually make a difference there. And so to me, it seems like it stinks, because it seems like this is the perfectly incentivized kind of deal that the Angels would want to make. But like you said, not confident that they're going to make it.
Yeah. And I think part of the reason why they won't make this deal, obviously the money is a factor, but I do think that, John, can we go back to a conversation we've had multiple times on this show? I think the Angels and the organization, they really believe in these young guys. They really believe in the Joe Adells and the Mickey Moniacs and the Zach Nettos, and they really believe in these guys. And we'll maybe hit this conversation in the next segment, but this is why I highly disagree with some of the everydayers that have said that we've just moved the deck chairs around. We haven't, because you're anticipating Zach Neto to be a better player. You're anticipating Nolan Shawnuel to be a better player. And isn't that what you're supposed to do with young players? Isn't that the perspective that you're supposed to have with young players? Joe Adell, if he's figured out his swing, is a 240, 250 batter with 25 to 30 home runs, maybe perhaps 100 RBIs. Isn't isn't that what you expect from young players? Isn't that what other teams expect as well? And so to just say like we're just hitting copy and paste on the same team this year, I think is misguided, because this team has young players that have shown the ability to grow, even being thrown into the fire and not having minor league experience. And so I think that the Halos really, really believe in these guys, Johnny. I think that the Halos want to give these guys an opportunity. And if they do sign one of these guys, then they're going to have to make another move. And so maybe they're wanting to have the team set a lot sooner before spring training than continuing to move some pieces around leading up to spring training. Those are my thoughts. Obviously, I think the money factor is always the number one factor. So don't hear me say that it's not. But I do think that maybe Perry Manassian and his team really love these young guys, and it's why they're hesitant to make some of these big moves, at least from an offensive standpoint, and to trade anybody away. Now, when it comes to pitching, I mean, it's not like we're throwing all of our young guys out there and they're going to get in the way. I do think that there's a tension between Detmers and Kahanowitz, and my gut tells me that they're going to go with Detmers because he's the more experienced guy, right? Which I don't think is wise at all. I think they should go with Kahanowitz. He proved himself, give him a shot, but all of that can be figured out at spring training. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think for me, when it comes to looking at what this team needs to be in 2025, it's got to be a narrative turning season. And if they're not going to land any of the big free agents because other teams are more interesting, other teams are more fun, Corbin Burns feels more secure with the fact that the Diamondbacks young core is more successful. And the thing is they have a track record.
Yeah.
They were there 2 years ago in the World Series. And so obviously that's going to inspire some confidence in a player. Also, obviously, he sought the comfort of being in Arizona, which I think is great because, again, he's just had twins and he's already established there. But I think what the Angels need to do is go out there, especially the young core, and show that this is a team worth being part of. So maybe you don't compromise and ask for a short-term deal from Santander or Flaherty. Maybe you do, because then you show them what you're made of, and then they want to come back or they want to extend or they want to do something like that. But I think, Mike, that you're right. I think that this has to be a year where the Angels' young players step up and show out and show them that this is a team worth being part of. And they filled some of the gaps that they had, some of the obvious gaps that they had from last year. I still think the infield needs some help because, again, we're going into opening day probably with Anthony Rendon at third base. And I just don't think that that's the solution unless Christian Moore arrives, unless he's there. By the way, did you see him take TB deep in that video on Twitter? I'm not going to say that guy's name because he can go away forever. But Christian Moore is a stud, so perhaps we see him up with the team. But again, Mike, I think that it has to be a narrative shifting season. I think that's important for these players. They've added starting pitching. They've added to. Here's what I'll say: all of the if you pay attention to what Perry Manassian has done, he has signed guys, maybe other than Yusei Kikuchi, who are there in service of helping the young players be better. Think about Hendricks, d'Arnaud, right? And Kikuchi is just a good player. And we've got him for a couple of years, which I think is important too. But they have done stuff in service of helping the young guys either get more playing time, because you're not going to rely on Kingery or Noda all the time.
Right.
Kevin Newman is there to supplement what Zach Neto and Rengifo are doing in the infield. And guys like Kyle Hendricks, I think, are there purely, Travis d'Arnaud are there purely to help the young guys be better. So perhaps we're looking over here at, we could do this and this and this. And the Angels are looking in this direction. And yeah, we could call that, well, nobody wants to be here. Perry doesn't know what he's doing. Artie doesn't want to spend money. We can label it all of that. But I think the fact that they came out of the gate so quickly and made those kinds of moves early, I think it does kind of go to show that there's a reliance on these young guys and they want to see them get better in 2025.
Johnny, our new favorite MLB Network host is Harold Reynolds, because he said two really interesting things about the Angels just this last week. So here's the first thing that he said. He said that the Angels are the most improved team this offseason compared to what they were last season. And
Didn't
He
we,
said,
correct me if I'm wrong, Michael, didn't we do a show where we talked about the
yeah,
war that was taken away from other AOS teams and the
yeah,
war that the Angels added? Yeah, Harold must have watched the show, or at
right,
least maybe we should be on MLB Network.
right. Harold is an everydayer, and he said what I just said in the last segment. He said these young guys are improving and they're going to take a step forward. And what Perry has done is he's added pieces to this team because, according to Harold, there's some superstars on this team not named Mike Trout. And Zach Neto is probably one of those guys that you can look at as a superstar. Logan O'Hoppe, another guy that you can look at to be a superstar. Somebody who's probably not a superstar, but somebody that is a great piece, a Taylor Ward type, is somebody like Nolan Shotwell, who's going to hold down first base at least this season, right? And so this is an interesting take, and I don't think I disagree with him, John. I think that the Angels have been the most improved team. They have made some really good moves. Have they made the moves that I want? No, they haven't made the moves that I want. But they have made some moves to improve this team, and I think that what we'll find is that this is a 10, 15 plus win team over last year's team that still doesn't bring us to the playoffs, still doesn't get us into that third wild card spot, but it does get us closer to 500. And I think that that is what we should walk into this season with some expectations that this team will sniff the 500 mark, that they could potentially get another 17 wins so that they're at 80 wins for the season and be somebody that's close to being a competitive team in 2026, which is what our conversation has been for a long time on this show.
Well, let me put it to you this way. I understand that, we talk about wins above replacement. What does a player bring? How many wins does a player bring to the team above a replacement player? Not even just simply league average, right? A league average is like a 2-WAR player. A 0 is like, well, you could, kick this guy out and it wouldn't make a difference. And people said, well, when the Angels added the WAR that they did with the players that they've added over this offseason, you have to consider, well, if they've only added 10 wins, so they went from 63 to 73. But that's not quite how it works, because you got to play the game. You got to play baseball. Mike, the Royals were 86 and 76 this season. And in 2023, they were 56 and 106. So you're telling me they added 30 WAR over last offseason? That's not how this works.
Right.
And so the fact that the numbers don't add, 1-to-1 when it comes to wins above replacement, you got to play the game. There are many games that the Angels should have won that they didn't win, and some games that they shouldn't have won, but they did win. And that's what baseball is at the end of the day. So the fact that, the Angels were at 63 wins and maybe they've added, 10, 11, 12 WAR doesn't mean they're just going to sit at 70, 73, 74 wins. They're going to be above that. And so I think that's why you could be confident in saying, the difference makers that they have added are going to bring a lot to this team. We talk about it all the time. You're not running Griffin Canning and Patrick Sandoval out there once every 5 days. And that's going to be all the difference in the world. And with Reed Detmers, there's a lot of questions around him that we'd like to have answered. But the fact is, you're not coming into the season going, man, Reed Detmers our number 2. He's got to be the guy. He's got to do it. You can go, oh, you know what? He's not pulling his weight. Now let's go to Kohanowitz. Let's go to Clausen. Let's go to Aldegari, right? You have those options now, and I think that's going to make a key difference in this season. Mike, he also said that the most surprising headline that they would have seen this time next year in 2026, they were playing a little predicting game. He said the most surprising headline that would appear this time next year is that the Angels have signed Vladimir Guerrero Jr., which you and I have been talking about that. We would love to see him in Angels Stadium. What kind of contract would he get? Would this be the move that the Angels make next offseason? To me, I think Artie would pay Vladdy Jr. because obviously there's the tie to Vladdy Sr. It's the perfect Artie Moreno nostalgia move, right? Whenever he needs to drum up interest or he needs to get fans to the stadium, it's, hey, check out this 2002 celebration, right? It's always something like that. And not that I'm complaining about that, but Artie is so wrapped up in Angels nostalgia from when he had a good team that this seems like a perfect Artie move. but it's also a move that I wouldn't mind making. What about you?
Yeah, I think it'd be a good move. And here's what I think the ripple effect would be. That means that you're going to have to trade somebody. And so it's either Taylor Ward or maybe even Nolan Shonowell. And if you trade Taylor Ward, then maybe Shonowell is your left fielder. He did play some left field in college. So this is going to have a ripple effect and maybe perhaps actually plays into the hand of Perry Manassian. Perry can actually then make a move for a pitcher by signing Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I think they give him 12 years, and he's probably up in the 450s, right? Maybe even the 500s. And Rendon's only got one more year after this year. And so you're not going to be paying three guys $30+ million. So it does feel like an already move, but I wonder if this move actually plays into the hand of Perry Manassian being able to move some of the minor pieces around so that he can go get a major pitching piece. And he's going to really fill this roster with the Caden Danas and the George Clausens and the Sam Aldegueris that we've all been hoping for and hoping that they would be great. So this could be a move that really could benefit the Angels, not just because he's going to bring eyes to the team, but it could benefit the Angels because it could help Perry Manassian make some behind the scenes move while we're all excited about while Artie's excited about Vlad Guerrero Jr.
Good correction there. I think that this is why the Angels need to have a narrative shifting season. I think that they need to come out ahead. They need to play 500 or better ball. The young guys have to take a step forward because once they do that and there's some eyes on Anaheim and then they do something like adding Vlad Jr., I think that's going to make all the difference in the world. So again, this season has to be a narrative shifting season and they have to improve upon where they were last season.
Hey, thanks for making Locked On Angels your first listen of the day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB with our friend Sully. You can find his show on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Hey, give us a follow on Twitter at Locked On Angels and at Super Halo Bros on Twitter and Instagram. Whether you're watching or listening, come on over to YouTube, find today's show, get in the comments section, hit that like button and hit that subscribe button. We want 10K by opening day. We're on our way, and we want you to be part of that. Mike, what do we have on deck for Wednesday's show?
Well, I'm going to pop a lozenge, and then we're going to talk about Taylor Ward. And if he's staying, how could that impact this lineup with guys like Jorge Soler and Mike Trout potentially being in the lineup more often than not this next season? So there's a lot to consider if Taylor Ward's going to be in this lineup, and we're going to talk about all of the considerations on Wednesday on Locked On Angels.
Looking forward to that conversation. Until then, my name is John, and that's my brother Mike.
And my name is Mike, and that's my brother John.
Thanks for being here with us, everybody, and we'll see you back here on Wednesday.
Thanks for joining, doll. It's great to have you on the show.
It's 30 years of smoking, Mike. Come on.
That's what happens.